Good night and welcome to Mindful Life 216. I am your host Nathan Springer. Thank you for being here. It is the 1st of May. The first day of May, May Day. That May Day is a Labor Day, a very important Labor Day. So it's May Day. Good night, Judd Mohammed over there on TikTok. Good night to all on Instagram. Good night to all on YouTube. Wherever you are viewing this, make sure you hit that like button. Double tap that screen for those on TikTok. However else you like that, you like this video, wherever you're viewing it, make sure to hit that like button. It really does help with the algorithm, you know, sending the notification out there to more and more people quicker and quicker. If you are looking at this on TikTok or on Instagram, be sure to subscribe to me over on YouTube, Nathan Springer over there on YouTube. Be sure to head over there and subscribe. You don't have to head over there now, but at some point in time, you know, you can head over there and subscribe so you don't miss any of the lives, you don't miss any of the other videos. As per usual, all of this content, the lives are brought to you by Mindful Education, the educational institution that I run. We offer private learning, private learning pods for students from preschool stages all the way up to CXC. Currently, we have some room in a CXC pod. The CXC pod right now, the CXC pod with room, we have about room for 3 more to fill that pod, and it's a math and English run-through course for Form 5 age students. If you know anyone interested in a pod like that, 6 students is the general number, so it's a small number of students in a more familiar class learning and math and English learning pod for CXC Form 5. We currently are filling one of those. We have limited space available. All right, this evening we're talking politics and crime and etc. in Trinidad and Tobago, because the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, the Honorable Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley, went down to PNM Sports Day and he had quite a bit to say. Now, I found one of the most irresponsible statements he made on that evening to be the statement he made in regards to the threats that shut down the schools on Friday. Judd Mohammed said, "Well, the scares made on the same day with the motion of no confidence." Yes, they were made on the same day as the motion of no confidence, and the Prime Minister highlighted that fact. And it seemed like he was attempting to draw a conclusion from that fact. And I don't know if that conclusion is a wise one to throw out there. So regularly, I hear the Prime Minister, the Minister of National Security, senior government officials, etc. So regularly you hear them speak about the separation of powers. You know, when you hear the Minister of National Security speaks, he talks about, you know, not having any say or sway over the police service, etc., etc., etc. And you don't want, they regularly talk about not wanting to prejudice investigations. They don't want to speak up too much on certain investigations because as in their positions of responsibility and leadership, they could prejudice investigations and make it more difficult to solve these issues. So, you know, they don't want to do those things. But nonetheless, we have our Prime Minister making some proclamations in the form of assumptions. PM Rowley at PNM Family Day. School bomb threats, not a coincidence. The Prime Minister seems to be waxing conspiratorial. Positive Radiation says, "I want to say a special good night to my boo on the live." Okay, shout out to Positive Radiation's boo on the live. We're having boo shout outs here. School bomb threats, not a coincidence, the Prime Minister says. Don't go down that road. That was the Prime Minister's response to the claims by the pundit speaking on the issue. The Prime Minister also addressed the bomb threats last Friday that sent more than 100 schools across the country into panic. You think that is accidental? That on the very day that they are having a vote of no confidence in the Minister of National Security, who they have been pillorying non-stop, that on that day, you wake up in the morning and virtually every school in the country has a bomb threat, he asked. You think that's a joke? You think that's by accident? You know that if you shut down every school in this country by calling in a bomb threat, the chaos and trauma that you will cause to those children and the fear in their parents, of all the days in the year, the one day that happens is the day when they are coming to the parliament to move a vote of no confidence in the national security minister. Now, I don't like those aspersions. I really don't like those aspersions. Because unless you have sure evidence of this, if this is anybody but the UNC, you just made it easier for them to escape. The Prime Minister of the country already says that basically he suspects the UNC is responsible. Ms. Akila says very responsible for a Prime Minister and head of national security. Exactly. He's head of the National Security Council. And he's out here before even the preliminary of the investigations are finished, saying that, well, casting aspersions that it must be the opposition responsible. Like, why would you do something like that? Even if you have such a suspicion, to throw those aspersions out into the public like that is reckless. At the very least, you'll call something like that reckless. You are prejudicing the police investigations. Now, the police know that, well, we don't even need to push too hard on this. The Prime Minister already says he believes it was a political operation. Forget about it. Based on what evidence? Like based on what reasoning? Now, I wouldn't say I'll put it past any political party to do something strange, but Positive Relation says, so the opposition is responsible for everything bad in the country. It really does seem that, but you're telling me that you believe the opposition party would disrupt the entire education system just to get back at the PNM. Now, I know the opposition really doesn't like the PNM, but I don't know. This doesn't strike me as a UNC move. UNC, by and large, the UNC demographic, the UNC main core is extremely pro-education. They are so pro-education to a fault. They boast about being so pro-education. I am not sure if they were attempting to corner the national security minister. Their main ploy would be shutting down the schools of the nation. Mr. Keeler says at this point with politics in the country, nothing is far-fetched. High Impulse Fit Meal says, to be honest, the opposition has never really been too opposing, so I'd let them slide with this one. I'm not sure what you mean by that. And let who slide with this one? I really dislike that statement. And the opposition responded. Rambali rejects PM's linking UNC to bomb threat. Shogunas West MP Dinesh Rambali has flatly denied the Prime Minister's remarks, in which he sought to link the opposition to the bomb threats on Friday. Speaking at a media briefing on Monday, Rambali told Dr. Rowley to go to hell as he reacted to the PM's attempt to link the UNC to the emailed bomb threats at the PNM's Family Day. Rowley asked his listeners, and we know what Rowley said. Rambali said Rowley's remarks were very disturbing and a desperate attempt to deflect attention from the pathetic performance of the government. Ladies and gentlemen, we reject any insinuation, any suggestion, and or any statement to the effect that the opposition UNC was in any way involved in that act of terror last Friday. I want to tell Dr. Rowley that he can go to hell and take his irresponsible statements with him. The population rejects you, Dr. Rowley, and we reject your dotish statements. That's coming from Mr. Tanquia. That's not coming from me. Sorry, Mr. Rambali. High Impulse Fit Fools says, when I say slide, I mean that I don't think that they're responsible. Just to clear on my statement very well. Richard Glumman says, UNC does bad talk Trinidad to the USA. I don't put anything behind them, but I don't think it was them too. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that I am sure the UNC is way past doing any kind of mischief in their political machinations, but this just doesn't seem, one, it doesn't seem like them, two, it doesn't seem like something that they would get the maximum purchase out of. Like, I would think if it was the UNC, they would have had a bit more coordination in their plans, in their reaction to it. Just calling it a terror attack isn't really harping on it. It doesn't seem like the UNC is holding this as the main chord that they're going to play throughout their political campaign. It doesn't seem like that. So it doesn't make sense for them to do that kind of risk, because if it is found out that it indeed was the UNC, that's way too risky for them versus a school child. That's what makes this statement from the Prime Minister so irresponsible. I find that was very, very, very irresponsible. What was achieved either way by doing this though? Any real outcome just yet? No, not really. As far as I know, no real outcome. That's what has me thinking I could believe it indeed was a school child. I can indeed believe it was a school child, because the ending outcome seems like something that wasn't properly thought out, like something a teenager would think through. Like, what was the outcome there? That seems like someone bored attempting to just get some kicks in their boredom, because I am not sure what was the conclusive outcome that anyone was looking for. Occupational Animal says the email in itself read as though someone was purposefully trying to sound oppressed. Yeah, the email was purposefully cryptic. I said that since the Friday itself. When you read the email, you could see that the person was purposefully trying to sound cryptic. It's like the email of a bad guy in a movie. Again, kind of sounds like a young person. The email of a bad guy in a movie, that's what it sounds like. There are very intelligent children in this country, without a doubt. It's not past a child to do something like that, not even remotely. I will not be surprised at all if indeed it was a child. And as I said in the video I did, was it yesterday, if it indeed was just a bored teenager catching kicks, that is actually the most dangerous outcome, because there are lots of bored teenagers that would like to catch kicks out there. And if all it takes is a bored teenager catching kicks to shut down and nearly cripple the country for a day, cost the country millions of dollars, and the Prime Minister's response is to attempt to make political mileage out of it, instead of trying to find some other solution, then this sounds like a problem that may resurface very soon. Nathan, was the response by the schools effective? It's according to what effect you're thinking about. Effective in regards to what? Like it was effective in getting the children out of the school eventually, but I mean, was it effective in keeping the children safe? We won't fully know, because there weren't any bombs, there wasn't actually an emergency. And was it effective in these children's schooling? Well, in that case, no, because it disrupted the children's schooling. So I don't know how we would even judge the efficacy of that. If there really were bombs, I think the response by the schools varied a lot. Some schools within the first hour, some schools were probably already emptied, while some schools dillied and dallied for some time. High Impulse says, but then the cybercrime unit seems to be ineffective as well, because it seems to me be, well, I don't know if I'd call them just ineffective with this, because cybercrimes aren't always the easiest thing to figure out. If you look internationally, the vast majority of cybercrimes seem to be figured out by forcing the internet companies to release the data. That's usually how those things are done. If you cannot get the internet companies to release the data, it's actually very difficult to figure out anything there. Kamala went in on Dr. Rowley also. Kamala, stand your ground to remove PNM opposition leader and UNC political leader Kamala Prasad Bisesa. Called on UNC supporters and the rest of the population to stand their ground and work to put the party back in government. She made this call at an interfaith service to mark the opening of the UNC's new party headquarters at Molchan Suchan Road, Chaguan, as the event also celebrated the 34th anniversary of the founding of the party. Referring to the legislation which the UNC is advocating as a solution to stop home invasions in Titi, Pasal Bisesa declared, "Let us stand our ground together to push forward and put our party back in government." She's speaking about the UNC. She urged citizens to look forward to the future with hope. Despite the darkness around them, only the UNC has the ability to prevail and bring about positive development in TNT. All of their speakers basically said that only the UNC has the ability to really fix TNT. But the Prime Minister rejects stand your ground law, says it can be used to commit legal murder. The Prime Minister said on Sunday afternoon arming citizens was not the answer to the country's crime problems, and the proposal by the opposition to enact stand your ground legislation is also not a viable solution. Remember I was telling you all, these laws are dependent on if the opposition requires a special majority, because if the opposition gets into governance and they require a special majority that requires the PNM is not going to allow the country to more freely be able to defend themselves. That is against the PNM's ideals. They are the status quo party. The elite status quo party does not have interest in common self-defense. Everywhere in the world, it's generally like that. The elite status quo party doesn't have interest in commoners defending themselves. That has nothing to do with them. It doesn't create a blip on their radar. High Impulse Fit News says, what percentage of the people really has confidence in either of those parties? Though very few of them, but there isn't much choice either way. No Jamil Enil. Didn't you ask me that before? Speaking, we know what she said. On Sunday, Rowley said when the opposition leader says that their answer to their supporters' call for defense from the criminal elements is to pass in the parliament of this country stand your ground legislation, I want to ask the opposition leader, what ground are they going to stand on to kill anybody they want to kill and simply say, I was afraid of that person, or that person was about to attack me in the road or in my yard and I killed them. He added that the punishment for previous larceny should not be death, which was what stand your ground laws might allow. Listen, this kind of talk is wanton ignorance from the Prime Minister. Wanton ignorance. What ground are you going to stand? Like, are you living in Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Rowley? They're going to stand the ground in their homes where people are being murdered. Where up till last night, there was a home invasion in Freeport. Trini Hotep says we already know what the deal is. They want us to depend on them for safety so they can keep having power. The thing is, I might not have even minded depending on the government for safety if they could have provided it. But they are woefully incapable of providing that safety. It seems clearly apparent in the present Trinidad and Tobago context. People are dying every day. Home invasions are an extremely regular occurrence. They are incapable, they are failing at their job of protecting the citizens. So if they are failing at it, who else should do the job? He's asking which ground are they going to stand? They're going to stand the ground that they are currently dying on, Dr. Rowley. And he added that the punishment for previous larceny should not be death. Previous larceny being theft. And that is so dishonest from Dr. Rowley. Because stand your ground isn't a law about killing people for stealing from you. That's not what stand your ground is about. It's not about shooting someone who snuck into your pen in the night to thief your goat. That's not what stand your ground is about. Stand your ground is castle doctrine. It says a man's home, a person's home is their castle, and they have the right to protect it as such. When someone enters your home with a weapon, threatening your life for your goods, they're telling you that they believe your life is worth less than your goods. You aren't, when you're protecting yourself, when you're standing your ground in your home, you aren't protecting yourself because you want to protect your goat and your sheep and your mango in your backyard. You're protecting yourself because the criminal wants to kill you for your goods. And the Prime Minister seems to be saying that it's okay for the criminal to think your life is worth less than your goods, but it's not okay for you to think the criminal's life is worth less than your life and your family's life. The criminal's life is worth more than your life. That's what the Prime Minister's statement sounds like now. That's what it builds up itself to. The criminal's life is worth more than yours. And he's saying the punishment for predial larceny should not be death. And I agree, it should not be death. But if you break my borders, you break my borders and enter my house, you have given up your right to determine how you should be treated in that case. You did not have to be there. You did not have to be there. You decided to jump in my yard. You have decided to give up that right. And what happens to you then is your fault. It's not the fault of anyone else. A thief is a murderer. I've been hearing this over 3 decades now, Joe says. Exactly. A thief is a murderer, especially a thief who comes to threaten your life for your goods. And then the Prime Minister says that the offense for that shouldn't be death. You sound like a crime apologist, Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley. That sounds like crime apologia, like you're apologizing on behalf of the criminals here. Like, no. We don't want something too strict on the other side for the criminals. I'm sorry. I am sorry. If there are 50 pit bulls inside of a yard, I have no problem with the house owner. If the 50 pit bulls stay inside of that yard and some fast person jumps the wall and finds out what the 50 pit bulls could do, I don't think that's anything wrong on the owner. You were not minding your business. And this kind of statement that the Prime Minister said here, to me, lends some credence to the criticism that you regularly hear from the UNC. Because you shoot someone who doesn't pose an actual threat to your life, you will end up in jail. Correct. Even in stand your ground laws. Even with stand your ground laws, I read a fair amount of US news, and even in states with stand your ground laws, if you brandish your weapon, like during the BLM riots, there was a couple that brandished their weapon at rioters that walked near to their property, and they ended up in serious legal problems. They didn't shoot anyone; they just pointed the weapon at people. And they ended up in legal problems. So stand your ground law isn't even an open license to just shoot anyone. And the Prime Minister is aware of this. The Prime Minister is a well-educated man. He has a PhD out there. So when he says things like this, he's purposefully misinforming people, in my opinion. He must know and understand how castle doctrine and stand your ground laws work. He said such laws, American-based legislation, were currently being challenged in US states that had passed it, and he's wrong. Actually, in the United States, Ms. Akila says Nadi PM sleeps comfortably at night, properly secured by state resources. We're going to get to that, Ms. Akila. Sorry, we're going to get to that. But actually right now in the United States, more and more states are relaxing their gun laws. It's either he is being dishonest about states trying to undo the castle doctrine laws, or he doesn't pay attention to US legislation. Because in the 1980s, I believe it was one US state or none had constitutional carry. And by the way, when the United States talks about constitutional carry, that means you walk into a gun shop and say, I want a gun. They sell you the gun and you put it in your pocket and you walk out. Basically no restrictions on gun ownership. And now How many states is it? Is it something up like 10 states like that? The United States is actually moving in the direction of relaxing their gun control laws. And the BLM crime spike from 2020 till now, the last 3 years, that saw that BLM crime spike after the riots, that exploded gun ownership in the United States. Gun ownership actually went up more because what the Prime Minister doesn't seem to understand here, and is the reality we are facing in Trinidad and Tobago, when the place gets more violent, people tend to want to get things to protect themselves. That's just how it goes. They want to get things to protect themselves. Richard Glubman says, I have an honest question. In the majority of the country, actually, is the majority of the country actually living in fear? Yes, Richard Glubman. I will say yes. Here's why I would say yes, Richard Glubman. Now, if you look at this, good night, Officer for Justice. If you look at it statistically, you would say that your statistical chances of being murdered is actually pretty slim. So you have no reason to be in fear. But that's not how the human psyche works. The human psyche works on norms and outside of the norm. So we're accustomed to a certain norm. We're accustomed to hearing a certain level of crime. So many people dying, so much crime happening around us. If all of a sudden the norm was here, but it spikes up to this level, all of a sudden that's going to sound extremely scary. That's going to sound extremely scary. So like in Sweden during the 20 teens, late 20 teens, where they were welcoming a lot of migrants, a lot of refugees entered into Sweden. Sweden had a massive crime spike in some areas. Now, when you listen to two sides of those news report that crime spike in Sweden, you heard two different things. One side would say that the crime in Sweden has gone up by 300% or something like that. I can't remember the exact number. I'm seeing an example. The crime in Sweden has spiked by 300%, and then you'd hear another side say that we have only experienced 30 more murders or something like that, and it's dependent on where their level was previously. So in terms of living in fear in Trinidad and Tobago, people are living in fear because home invasions being such a regular occurrence wasn't at least something you heard about so often. Home invasions, just like the kidnappings of the early 2000s. The kidnappings of the early 2000s changed the landscape in Trinidad and Tobago. There are still some Trini businessmen living in Canada because of the kidnappings of the early 2000s. So, yes, that has an effect. It's still different from when the number gangs are killing each other out. That's still different from when the number gangs are killing each other out. This is me inside my home. And at any given moment, someone can run in and turn my entire life, my entire family's life upside down. That's the very definition of feeling insecure. Where where is supposed to be the most secure person for place for a person? Your home. Your home is your castle. Inside of your most secure place, your home, you cannot feel secure at no point in time, because at any point in time, a group of multiple young men can burst through your door with guns demanding your life saving. That's the definition of not feeling safe. So, of course, many people around the country indeed are not feeling safe, Richard Glub. I would say they indeed are not. He warned, Prime Minister Rowley warned that they allowed some people who hate other people to use it for legal murder. Rowley also chastised pundits Dr. Brahmanan, Rambachan and Satyanan Maharaj for comments they made last Wednesday suggesting citizens of East Indian descent were being targeted by urban youths from the East-West corridor. Now, here's the link in this, and someone tell me if I am reading into this more than he is saying, or if this seems like something that is there in the undertone. Because the Prime Minister criticizes the pundits who pointed out the racial disparities in crime, and the pundits that believe that urban youth were attacking East Indians. And then, well, not and then, but also in that speech, he said that the stand your ground and loosening of the gun laws would be for the intention of allowing some people who hate other people to use it for legal murder. Is there a link in what he is saying there? Is he making a link in what he's saying there? Positive Radiation says, I'm sure these security companies send workers to get firearms training. Yes, they do. Positive Radiation also says, you know, when the first man gets shoot for mangoes, all mango thieves will slow down. That is the very idea of deterrence. And some people act like deterrence doesn't work, but deterrence is the principle the police service works on also. The police service, generally speaking, doesn't stop crime. They deter crime by catching the criminals after the fact. And self-defense deters crime by the criminals knowing you generally don't get away so easily when attempting to commit crime. Trini Otep says, urban youth making me laugh like they afraid to say the race over. What you think about Roma? Who Roma are you talking about? Please, that not be any kind of wild bacchanal you throwing in there. Rowley said guns for all would not the answer and took aim at Maharaj's comment saying when the opposition leader and how many other pundits want to get up in this country and say the crime we are all facing, that we are all exposed to, that we are all victims of, when they want to get up and say that it is black people who are attacking Indian people, I say today, you all stop that. Don't go down that road. That is a road of no return. Rowley recalled being the victim of a home invasion over 2 decades ago when a man entered his West Moorings bedroom armed with an 8-inch dagger while he and his then 7-month pregnant wife was asleep. He said he lunged at the man's throat and the man ran off, leaving behind his blade. So many statements, so many things I have to say on this. So many things I have to say on this. The Prime Minister brought up Mina, you will be muted. Just so you know, we mute people over in these parts and you will be muted. So the Prime Minister brought up an incident that happened to him over 20 years ago where someone allegedly jumped through his window in West Moorings and he jumped at the man's neck. But first of all, I want to know why he jumped at the man's neck. The punishment for prettier larceny shouldn't be death. Why were you trying to choke out the man? Why are you trying to choke out the man? All he wanted to do was get a little food for his family. The punishment for prettier larceny shouldn't be death. And Prime Minister Rowley, why did you lunge at the man's neck? And either way, I wonder right now, if a thief attempts to do the same thing, if a bandit attempts to jump through Dr. Rowley's window right now, what would happen to him? Who would stop him right now, Dr. Rowley? That's my question. Who would stop him right now? Men with guns, wouldn't they? I'm pretty sure. Pew pew. Pow. Why is that? Why is that? How come you get guns to protect you when you sleep, but the other people in Trinidad don't get the same? Why is that? Isn't everyone in Trinidad supposed to be equal under the law? How come you get guns to protect you? Isn't everyone else's life worth the same? I seem to recall, was it the Prime Minister's entourage was going down the highway and somebody attempted to drive behind them for something and they were shot at? Anybody else remembers this? Remembers an occurrence as that? Or am I just remembering things wrongly? I seem to recall something just like that. Some guy followed a little too closely behind the Prime Minister's entourage and some shots were released. It was the president, right? The president. So, wait. Is the punishment for following the president supposed to be death? Seeing as the Prime Minister is saying the punishment for someone running up in your house and putting a gun in your face and stealing your belongings, the punishment for that shouldn't be death. But the punishment for driving too close to the president should be death? Where's the consistency? Because this starts to seem like a two-tiered system. It starts to seem like the same kind of monarchy, feudal lord system that democracies were supposed to do away with. Like, we know how monarchies used to run, where the lords and the ladies and the kings and the queens and their dukes and duchesses, they have their knights and their servicemen and their men at arms always guarding them. But you dare not walk with your sword inside of their town. How dare you? That you must relinquish that sword. Are we back to that kind of days where you alone must get the protection, but we must all suffer in the muck here? Richard Glubman says, in any other country, he would have been dead. Well, then justify that for me, Richard Glubman. Justify that for me. How can the Prime Minister say that the punishment for predia larceny shouldn't be death and use that as the justification for not allowing citizens to arm themselves in their own homes, but then at the same time say that in another country, someone who does the heinous crime of following too closely to the president should be dead? What's the logical justification there? Or is it just a case of your betters and shut your mouth, you puny little pleb, and bow to your betters? You know, I find that I really don't like the attitude when some people seem like they enjoy treating the politicians as their betters. They enjoy it. Like, I am sure there were so many people inside of that crowd that were cheering for Dr. Rowley, saying, you cannot own a gun, but if you break into my house, a man with a gun is going to stop you. And there were people like, yes, Dr. Rowley, yes, yes, doctor. Like, I find that to be the height of pathetic. That's the height of pathetic. What if homemade guns are used? You will be charged for a homemade gun same way. Never say, right? Or hot oil. Listen, the legal requirements, that's why the stand your ground laws are being proposed, because the legal requirements under the British system is a minimal use of force. Now, the reality is, in Trinidad and Tobago, our police service, by and large, does not prosecute people if they harm home invaders. Big someone doesn't share your views, that's condescending. Yes, it is condescending. You're right, it is condescending, because I find it pathetic when citizens look up to elected officials as they do monarchs, as they did royalty, where they look up to elected officials as if they are their betters, where they look up to elected officials and they are willing and encourage those elected officials to treat them differently than they allow themselves to be treated. Yes, I condescend to people who have that view. Yes, I look down on that view. I'm not denying it. I look down on the view where some people believe that politicians are better than them. I condescend to that view. So if you have the view that Dr. Rowley is your better and he should have armed security while you should suffer, well then I condescend to that view. I look down on it. Joe says minimal use of force when the perpetrator uses full force. Okay then. That's exactly the point of stand your ground laws. That's exactly the point. How could you be asking me to use minimal force and this person wants to kill me for my phone? Positive Radiation says, what happened to the Community Comfort Patrol? I guess you'd have to ask Miss Erla about that one. I don't know. I do not know. The Prime Minister went on to reiterate why he would not sit down with the opposition leader, nor with Mr. Gary Griffith to discuss any kind of crime-fighting proposal, because he basically says they are criminals themselves. Jane Doe, Titi, why is that hilarious? Or what is hilarious in that exactly? What part of that is hilarious? I don't find that funny. I don't find it funny. I don't find it funny the undue adulation that people give to politicians. I think that's a lot of the reason why we are in a lot of the negative positions we are in. Positive Radiation says, can I use homemade pepper spray? I have some scorpions growing in my garden. I am pretty sure if you use a homemade concoction and you injure someone unduly, there may possibly be some legal consequence you could put in there. You could face. My far-fetched... What is the far-fetched interpretation, Jane Doe? What was far-fetched about what I said? Does the Prime Minister have armed security? Yes. Did the Prime Minister say that the general population does not need armed security? Yes. So isn't the conclusion to be drawn from that the Prime Minister believes that he requires armed security while he doesn't think you do? The law covers you if there's a threat to life. Yes, it does. But then that threat to life could be a thing to determine. Anybody remember the man from Marbella that made the guillotine trap? Yes, and wasn't it his own niece or some kind of relative that was killed? Jane Doe, you know, you could come in and we could talk. You could enter and we could talk and you could explain to me how it's a stretch to say exactly what is happening. Like, I have no idea how that's a stretch. You'd have to come and explain that to me. The box is open there. You are welcome. I will listen to you. I wouldn't talk over you. You can come and explain to me. How is it a stretch to say what the Prime Minister said? Like, where's the stretch there? She didn't die, but she is one hand less. Yee! Ouch. Yeah, I remember that. It was some relative or something like that he caught in that guillotine trap. And I think when he did that, the police announced that basically that is illegal. Like, if you set up a booby trap in your house and a thief injures themselves in it, you could face legal consequences for that. If I remember correctly, that's what I heard back then. If I remember correctly, I seem to recall the police saying something like that. Where did Jane Doe go? And Jane Doe, this is my disappointment so often, that people would have views. They just have that view because they have an emotional attachment to their political party, but they have no reasoning to base that view on. You just threw that out there because probably you felt offended because you have that PNM party card there, and you that they got the PNM really hurt or triggered something in you, but you aren't giving any reasoning. You're just wrong again. That's a like, give a reasoning. If you are so confident about your position, give a reason, or jump in the box and say something. But that's the problem with partisan folks. That's the problem with people when they find themselves in the grasp of partisanship. And that's the problem in Trinidad and Tobago. A large contingent of the Trinidad and Tobago population are partisan in nature. You could say what you want and make how much sense you want, and if it goes against the party that they grew up supporting, there's no way they change their mind. This is why it's funny, you keep having wrong assumptions. I'm not making assumptions. Do you understand what the word assumption means? Do you understand that word? I am not making an assumption. I am saying partisanship in Trinidad and Tobago makes it impossible to reach the people. But honestly, you think the PNM cutting it? No, I do not think the PNM is cutting it. No. If that's the question you're asking. Brenzo, you attacked Rowley, who they treat as God, they worship the Prime Minister. I'm sure some people do, but it's not the first time and it won't be the last time. I would always remember the being a bit taken aback in my single digits back in the 90s, and you go home by certain people and you would see a picture of their deity of worship with the garland around it, and then you would see Bastio Pandey there with a garland around it too. Some people worshipped Bas in his time too. It's the nature of politics. it's the nature of politics. It creates that cult worship class. It creates that cult worship class, and people who often give themselves in it, they don't even notice when they reach down to that point. Sometimes people, very intelligent people, otherwise, you speak to them, and you speak to them about politics, and all of a sudden, their intelligence is turned off. You speak to someone about physics and they're like, wow, this is an intelligent person. And then you say something about a political party and all of a sudden the brain just goes blank. Politicians love that. They love that human tendency to blind tribalness. To blind tribalism, politicians feed off of that. That's their mainstay. Their mainstay is ensuring that the population remains blindly tribal, so that when they whisper a secret word, and this half of the population steps into line. The dream of a politician. I just whisper the word and the population steps into line. And Trinidad has so much of that. How many safe seats are there in Trinidad? Why should there ever be something like a safe seat? Neil says, how is the home invasions in the West and the rest of Trinidad? It have legal guns in the West. Actually, there aren't that many home invasions in the West. At least to my reading recently, to my recent reading of the home invasions. They seem to be focused around the San Juan central to south region. Not particularly in the west of Trinidad.
Nathan, I have one question, and I think this is a question a lot of our citizens are asking. How can we legally protect ourselves? Because if we don't protect ourselves, we can't rely on the National Security Services, because they never have vehicles, they never reach on time. When somebody they're finding 21 vehicles and 1,001 soldiers to show up on the scene and look good with big guns. But when we actually need them, it's not happening. So how are we to really protect ourselves as citizens? We wait on law enforcement, the matter can end up in the justice system. So if we do get the good, or the 75% of the good police officers out there to do their job, the matter can end up in the court system. By the time that do get up in the court system, I don't know, my assets already gone down the drain. How are we to protect ourselves? What is there for us, the citizens?
That is a...
Because if a businessman is waiting 5 years for a legal firearm and he can get an illegal one in a couple of days, after a while, what do you think he's going to do?
And that's exactly what I was going to say in a positive. When the system fails, it encourages people to seek help outside of the system. Exactly what you said there. If there's a businessman who has been robbed once, he picked up a group of people stalking his home before. He saw some people looking around his home. Trying to figure out a way to break in once. He saw that, and he knows his application is already in the works and he's not going to get through anytime soon. You are encouraging that businessman now to seek help outside of the legal framework. It's like with the school shutdown threats that went on Friday, that whole bomb threat nonsense. The school rules say that phones are to be kept off and inside of your school bag. All of the children who broke that school rule and had their phone on and inside of their pockets were better off on Friday because they were able to communicate with their parents much more quickly. The children who had their phones in their pockets didn't have to leave their phones in school because of the evacuation protocol. So now I am aware of some of my students whose parents are who you would call decent parents. They are good parents. They are parents who pay attention and want their children to follow rules. And now those good parents are telling their children, break that school rule. Don't turn off your phone. Don't put it in any school bag. Keep that phone on and in your pocket. Why? Because the system that is there to allow for those rules that previously existed, that system is collapsing. So we cannot rely on the system. So now we have to rely on ourselves and we have to go outside of the rules. That's what the collapsing system encourages.
You know, reminded me of a situation that I remember at a secondary school in Tobago. A principal got or had to appear in court because of a student's phone a number of years ago. Now looking back at it, really and truly, that makes no sense. Because instead of teaching the students how to manage the use of the cell phone, creating a black market for it. Because
Correct.
my phone got seized at school too for communicating with my parent and wasn't nothing illegal. I think what this now shows to is the way our leaders are thinking and the direction we go in. Because instead of banning something, why not look for the positive use and encouragement, proper management of it?
Bro, positive. I was having that very same discussion this weekend going here with the same phone topic. Here's what that feels like to me. It's like in the days, compare what you all are talking about to the underground. Yes, there's an underground forex market, but anytime I see forex, I kind of pull back a brakes a little bit. But yeah, I was talking about that very same thing, and it's feeling like, imagine we were alive in a society on the brink between spoken language and written language. We've started writing down our language onto pieces of paper instead of just speaking it and remembering it through spoken stories. And now we are in school and the teachers are like, why are you all using this technology paper business? Stop that. How dare you use paper? We are banning pens and paper. The real way is for you to remember it in your head like the ancestors have done. This pen and paper carrying message things. These young children drawing porn and thing on the paper, Them writing slackness to each other, I saw a young man write a love letter to a young woman on this new pen and paper business. This thing will collapse our society. Ban pen and paper in school. This is what it feels like currently. We are on the crux of a technological advancement where we are now basically paper is reaching the point of obsolescence, where no longer it's needed, not nearly as much. But in schools, it seems like we are fighting to ensure that we keep the children using the archaic technology instead of actually going with the times. Payman says, positive 2 hours ago, my neighbor called the police on a domestic emergency. Still no show. How? Benicia John says, a school in Central, they take every student phone until school over. Wow.
No, but listen, and this is why I asked earlier when I started the discussion, have we assessed the response? Did you look at the amount of time the information got out? Did you look at the time the school officials saw the email and read the email and understood the gravity of it? Why are we not assessing that?
Bro.
We're trying to say, okay, who do what, fine. But there needs to be an element of the population say, how was the response? Did the fire service respond on time? Did we have bomb technicians on spot? How many bomb technicians did we have? If there was did we have sniffer dogs prepared? Did the police come with equipment to get in? How soon was it? What time the first student left the classroom? How soon they got to the muster point? Was there anybody at the muster point checking on the students? Because to me, we had a bomb scare in my school during a time when I was there. And we had just come from Trinidad. So we had a suitcases and all kind of story. Who checks these things? Who is the ministry able to say? Sorry to make it sound wrong, but did the ministry or was the ministry able to say in 24 hours or in 30 minutes we were able to evacuate a classroom of 400 students? Everybody was accounted for. We were able to contact the parents through this means, through that means. Yes, it was a negative, but we can see
not going to happen in Trinidad.
Outcomes of it.
That is not, you're asking for a lot there. Bear in mind, some schools didn't even check their emails. Some schools didn't even check their emails. Jane, just to address that final here, I invited you to come and talk. So to say that I say someone is partisan for disagreeing with me is wrong. I enjoy disagreement. Disagreement is kind of what helps the show to go on better. So your disagreement would have been encouraged. The problem is your disagreement doesn't come with a point. It comes with, I disagree. Why? Because I disagree. Why? Because you're wrong. Why? Because I disagree. Pointless. So yeah, moving on from that, positive radiation, you're asking for a lot there from the ministry. That's not going to happen. As I said, some of the schools did not check their emails. I was hearing from someone inside of the inner workings where they said that some schools actually received calls because the school was not acting like they received the threat because no one even checked the email to see the threat in the first place. Like the threat was sent in a high-tech way, and some of the schools were so backward they didn't even receive the threat. For all you know, the threat was sent to every school, for all you know. And the only schools that didn't receive the threats were the ones that didn't check their emails. The response to it though, as I said, as I've been saying, positive. I don't even know if we would ever be able to properly respond to something as such. If there was indeed a threat where bombs were placed in every single school, there isn't a way to actually soundly respond to that threat, really and truly. What we want, I think the main thing in this is to ensure things like this do not happen. That's what we want. To have a society where, like, if this is a teenager that is extremely indisciplined. Because I could tell you as a teenager, to even think to send a bomb threat to your school, you're paranoid about what your parents will do to you. Much less to send a bomb threat to the entire nation of schools. That's a child who is under no control of their parents. So that's why to me the main problem in this is if it indeed is a child who did this, is the lack of control over the children, the indiscipline. And the effect of this indiscipline is so far reaching, it's scary to think that there are many more indisciplined children like that in the system.
I want to throw another question in.
Yeah, man.
I wonder if anybody alive remembered when a minister's, I think it was son, had lost his cellular phone.
Yes.
And how quick it was recovered.
Yes.
We are still waiting days now to figure out the origin of this email. And if this person has such indiscipline and is oh so bad and oh so wrong, how can they send such an encrypted email so quickly? And we don't see a response.
Well,
we can't track the IP.
Indiscipline doesn't mean dumb, eh? Indiscipline doesn't mean dumb.
I understand exactly what your point is, but what I'm saying is we still need to look at the response. Because I remember a couple of years ago, is a story I heard, and they were saying when somebody stole 25 cents from everybody who has a bank account in Trinidad and Tobago. If he has that ability, why are we putting that individual in the jail? We need to sign a deal with them and have them cracking all the government systems so we could constantly find the loopholes and we'll always have our intelligence systems working. Them is people you give a work. You understand where I'm coming from? Yeah.
Yeah, but in the private sector, they regularly do that. In the private sector, but basically, if you're a hacker and you hack into someone's private company, very likely they may hire you. But finding an email isn't as straightforward as some people may like to believe. Like, the internet is the place where black market deals are done for a reason. There are people who conduct terrorist business over the internet, and the US military, with all of their might, isn't able to find them, you know. So the internet could be a dark and murky place to wade through and figure out. Shane R says it can't be tracked. I believe it was sent via a site that specializes in temporary private emails. Exactly. So if I were to guess, and I'm not trying to give people advice on how to do these things, that's by no means what I'm doing, but very likely what they would have done, they would have used that temporary email formed from a site that specializes in that, used while using a VPN. So even if you could find the site, and even if you could get the site to tell you which IP address was used to make this email address, that IP address would be for a computer in Timbuktu that is bouncing off of a mirror in Indonesia, bouncing off of a mirror in Siberia, bouncing off of a mirror down in Mexico. You're not going to find the email. It's just not going to happen like that. And this is the point I keep making.
Aspirations, eh?
Yeah.
But suppose that email originated in Russia. Suppose, because we know what's happening down in Venezuela. Suppose that specializes in Russia. I don't know, I'm just thinking. Like, because right now we had a thing global.
I don't see I don't see a reason why any other country would want to shut down Trinidad and Tobago's education system. Like, I don't see the benefit for any other country doing that. Like, so Wendell said he doesn't believe it's a child. Honestly, I think it's a teenager. If I were to guess, this is my guess, I would guess it's an older teenager with a good bit of time spent on the internet, understanding some of the inner workings of the internet. Those things aren't hard to do. Which email list has all those schools' addresses? That, to me, as I said since Friday, that is the beginning of the investigation. Find out if it was an email list, if there was ever an email thread sent to those exact computers before, those exact emails before. Is it an email list sent by the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Education? Is it a regular email blast sent out by this department in the Ministry of Education? Find out where that email list is, because the emails may be the most important things to me. Because, I mean, you could probably find out school emails over the internet if you dig up a bit, but to find out over 100 school emails by just digging up is not something very easy to do. To me, that's the person making a temporary email, hiding their location, sending the email, writing it weirdly and in some kind of cryptic manner. That's not the most difficult part. The most difficult part is really and truly just finding all the emails.
But Nathan, question, is it moe.tt emails it went to, or the school's Gmail or Ymail or whatever? Because I know usually when you have government emails, it might be Nathan.Springer, edu, or wherever at utt.edu. There's a certain pattern.
Yeah.
You usually use those emails because they're usually on a specific network.
Yes, but nonetheless, even if it was at moe.edu.tt, you still need to know the specific email addresses to send it to, because it could be Mount Hope Junior Secondary, since the Mount Hope was a junior secondary. It could be Five Rivers Junior Secondary, or it could be Five Rivers East Secondary. It could be Five Rivers East Secondary School. You know, an email still. This isn't someone who guessed out all of those emails. I don't believe they guessed all of those emails. I think they knew the emails. They got them.
This wasn't a coincidence. This had to be planned. To execute it in such a manner, this had to be something that was being planned, and it most likely would not be one individual.
Yes, because they as I said, they said follow-up calls were made to police stations. I heard they called a police station and told the police station all the schools in their district. Follow-up calls were made to schools. This is a lot of coordination. That's a lot of coordination. I still think, though, as I said, if I had to guess, if I had to put my wager, I think it's a youth because of the nature of it. It seems like the pointless prank of a youth. Yeah, positive.
Because this seems to be well orchestrated in the direction we take it. This seems to be something out of NCIS or a movie.
Yes, it does seem well orchestrated, but to me that doesn't move away my suspicion from it being children. It doesn't move away, because children can plan things. Good night, John Robbie. They can plan things. They are able to make plans, and just the nature of it. Like, I don't see why an adult would do something like this. I just don't see why an adult would do something like this. If it is big people doing this, I would think it's the start of something. They're testing something, and that goes into an even scarier conspiratorial line. I think it's young people trying to figure out something, trying to test their boredom. They're bored, and they thought out of this grand plan, and they went through it, the plan. That's what I think it is, if I had to guess. And the problem is, it's so easy to repeat. Yeah.
We heard rumors, I think either a couple administrations back of the Israelis and some spy
Pegasus
and the blimp and those kinds of stories. My question is, let's technologies probably would have come in very handy in situations like this.
Maybe.
Probably we may be able to just press a button and within a couple hours we see the SWAT teams roll up on somebody's house and we see all those movie theatrics playing out in real life.
Good night, Mr. over on Instagram. Some of those technologies may have indeed helped, but the Pegasus...
What could work for good could also work for bad.
Yes. The Pegasus software was basically phone tapping and phone tracking. So if you don't know the phone or you can't find the phone, there's nothing to tap or track. So I'm not sure even that software, if it would have helped in this kind of email business. That's not what would help here. I don't think that has much help in this. But for me, watching how the PNM government, Dr. Rowley, etc. move, I do not want them with any kind of extreme power. I don't want it. I don't trust them. They have too much of an elitist vibe where they seem to behave like they are in another group compared to the society, and people with that kind of behavior tend to take too many privileges. So I'm not enthused to give them much extra power. But you all know bomb threat not to take lightly. Good night, Akinde McFarlane.
No, but what I'm saying is, and it's things like this for me, I tend to look for more of a positive light. I tend to look for options and ways we can fill the gaps in these loopholes. I think we need to change the way we communicate one. Because when I first saw this story, the office where I work, I thought it was Trinidad alone. And it's then when we begin to call around at others, like, a number of Tobago schools got caught as well. And I got concerned because I have family members, friends in the school system as well. The last bomb tech I knew in Tobago got buried 2 or 3 years ago. I am now wondering, do we have that kind of result? Do we have 8 schools in Tobago to have bomb? Do we have 8 bomb technicians to respond to each of it individually? Do we have the robots? Let's say we don't want to send man. Do we have the robot now that can go in and defuse a bomb? Do we have that amount of equipment in the country to really respond to those? That's how I began to think. But because it may happen at my workplace, the bomb may be across the road and I don't know. But the strength of it might affect the blast by me. And I don't want to.
Is a bomb threat in Trinidad and Tobago so important that we would invest in having bomb techs for each school and multiple bomb robots? I mean, we have had a lot of bomb threats, but no explosions. Well, actually, there was the one in Port of Spain, eh? There was one in Port of Spain.
No, but Nathan, even I understand the way we think now, but prevention is better than cure. I think sometimes it's better you invest in your human resource than when you really need them, you don't have them.
I understand that,
I am not saying by a million robot, but at least one per division. So we probably have one person to operate, and we have a couple other bomb technicians itself. So you could share the resources. Because this happened at the schools. What happened if this took place at the airport? What happened if this took place in a police station or at the prisons? So there are so many key infrastructure that we need to look at.
But
what happened if this took place at the Ministry of Finance?
It's a question of opportunity costs. It's a question of opportunity costs. The country has limited resources. We cannot buy every single thing. Buying one thing means we cannot buy certain other things. Is a bomb threat so much of a threat that we need more investment? Really? That we really need more investment in bomb fighting? Like, I'm not sure if it is. Now, I'm not saying that we probably can't benefit from a little robot.
Because if Nathan Springer is caught in a bomb threat and it happened, I am going to cry from now till Jesus come. Let's be real. I think it's a balance that we had to figure it out.
It is a balance. It is a balance. It is a balance. If they threaten the jail, I feel nothing going to happen. Me too. Of course, they ain't evacuating any jail for that. But you know, the thing is, you could take some of those bomb threats seriously, because I always remember that occasionally in the raids in Trinidad and Tobago, the police be finding grenades. Like, I always remember the jailbreak. There was a grenade in that jailbreak, you know. I don't know if you all remember that. The grenade didn't go off, but there was a grenade. and the police occasionally raid people and find grenades. I'm like, bro,
When
who using a grenade?
there are liquid bombs that you could create. There are liquid bombs. If you look at some of these videos online, because I like aviation, so I was looking at somebody changing the aviation technology. You can create liquid bombs, and you don't need to import a lot of these chemicals. A basic student that does biology and chemistry, they will have a fair idea as to what to mix to create what effect. And then chemical warfare is an area that we're not even exploring. But if we now see the emergence of chemical bombs in these places, and anthrax and toxic gases.
Richard Glubman, he looking for the FBI to flag him. He looking for the FBI to flag him out there. But that's part of the issue. I've heard it said before that some people believe the earth has a very limited lifespan. The earth is going to end soon, and the reason that they say is the humans are becoming too powerful, and it's like if we get enough power to create a weapon where if someone flicks a switch, they're going to wipe out the world, and we may get enough power to do that, the chances of there being a human who is insane enough to flick the switch is kind of high. So that's kind of the issue. We're getting more powerful, and there are people who would be willing to do some of those things. So the bombs that could be made, and yes, homemade weapons can be made. There's all of that. That's why, as I keep saying, to reiterate again, the way the country survives bombs, Trinidad and Tobago, is not by having a really good bomb sniffer dog and really good robots. The way our country survives bombs is by having a culture where no one blows up the place. It's a cultural solution, really and truly. It's the point I made, like, we have 7,000 police to 1.4 million people in Trinidad and Tobago. The reason Trinidad and Tobago, is law-abiding for how much we are law-abiding is not because of law enforcement. It's because the culture of the people generally follows the law. Same with schools. 50 adults, 50 teachers in a school cannot actually, literally manage 1,000 plus students. It's not possible. The only way that happens... Exactly. Well, the prisons is a bit different. The only way that happens in schools is because those children are under the authority of their parents. So the teachers can piggyback on that authority to manage all of those children. It's a cultural solution. Now, if all 1,000 students in a school are now indisciplined without parents to answer to, teachers cannot manage that school.
Yes, and it has happened. The group that I was a part of in Scarborough Secondary, we had no grad because of it. If 1 year group and a few members of the year group decide to go rogue, it was chaos in the school compound. A teacher walk into a garbage bag of water with garbage.
Yeah, I've heard some like that.
Majority of the students did not participate in the activity. We literally stepped on and was watching what was happening, and a few students chose to go rogue. I think what we're doing now, and I mentioned it earlier, we're losing principles. Because as a parent, I would tell my child, don't use your phone in class or don't use your phone in school or switch it off because those are the rules. How do we now tell them, leave it on because if this happens, I need to know what's happening. I need to know if I need to come for you. I need to know how to respond. And that might seem be the thing to rescue us because suppose my father is a bomb technician. If I hear bomb threat in school, Daddy, I hear bomb threat in school, I'm scared. He might not be able to trigger an alarm or trigger somebody or get a faster response than even going through the normal system. Because if my parent is a member of the law enforcement and somebody come at me, I call him my daddy. And my daddy will now feel more emotionally attached to respond than just to be laissez-faire. He might pressure his supervisors to respond.
Like
so we're not going to tell them break the school rules now to ensure your safety. It's like we're teaching them double standard from a young age.
But that's what's going to happen, and it's already happening. And it would happen more and more and more as the school system disintegrates and devolves more and more and more. Like I've already said it. We do homeschooling. We teach homeschooling. So my children, my daughter, so far, she is not seeing the inside of those public schools. The public schools that existed in 2000s, in the 90s, in the 80s, they do not exist anymore. If if you do not have 1,000 disciplined children inside of that school, you're sending your child into a war zone. It's a war zone. And I don't know how many of you have ever read Lord of the Flies, but you're going to recreate some independent societies in there. It's going to have gangs inside there. I was reading an article recently where the Minister of Social Development, or one of those, was talking about the number of students that were suspended. And one of the students that was suspended from primary school was a gang leader. Like, sir, you ain't even reached 12 yet. How are you leading a gang? And you're going to send your nice little angel princess Pickney into that? No, you're not. These systems, I don't think these systems are going to continue.
Left it alone. Because my response to a student like that is not to imprison him or not to make him feel bad. You know, have to figure out we should channel our energy into something else. He could be the next Bill Gates. The young man that we see at that age and stage leading a primary school gang. He could be the next, I don't want to use Donald Trump as an example, but somebody with that kind of mindset, because clearly he already knows how to influence people. Clearly he already knows how to manage things efficiently and properly. Clearly he knows how to have persons under his control. So why not look for avenues and guide him into those spaces?
Well, I suppose in Trinidad they may send him into Milat, and he might get some of that. So, bro, are you saying you are against the school system or just the school system here? I don't want to use the word against, but I am very critical of the school system in general. The education system, the public education system, was not created with the purpose of making the students most intelligent. That really wasn't the aim. The aim was mostly controlling the population, acculturizing immigrants that come in. So, like, if the Venezuelans come in, you want all of us to go to the same school so we share the same culture as we grew up, and training people for the industrial age. That was the general idea of the creation of the public education system. And many of the tenets of the public education system, many of the principles, many of the ways it functions still work to create those outcomes. I'm not saying that all of those outcomes are necessarily horrible. Having a unified country and a unified culture has its benefits, and I understand why you'd want something like that. But maybe I don't want to unify behind the culture that you want to push through your public education system. Maybe I don't. So I'm not saying that I am against it, but I am very critical of it. And I am wary that it does not offer what it promises very often.
Nathan, I want to jump back in on a point you brought.
Yeah, man.
I've always had a concern there. I love the Mile at My Part program.
Mm-hmm.
I like the initiative. I like the idea. It gives me a kind of Cadet Kelly kind of military academy vibes, which I like and I support. I have two concerns over it though. I think one, we need a Tobago branch of the Mile program.
I agree.
So yeah, and I fix home first. Yeah, I had a dance I had before I dance abroad. We need a female arm to the Mile program. Because sometimes we stigmatize young men, and sometimes these females are the one instigating and driving and managing some of these things, and it creates a lot more problems than we seem. So I think we need to expand that program.
I agree with that.
The females have created a female version of that same My Part program.
I agree with that, because clearly, if you look at the schools, you're seeing that female indiscipline is a problem. It's not just the boys will be boys. It seems like some of the girls are being boys too. There are a lot of violent young ladies there, and oftentimes a violent young lady tells a big story behind that. So
I can tell you from experience. You see, these military women, sometimes they're more judged than the men. I had an encounter as a Boy Scout years ago. Still to this day, we spoke about it. The officer is now resigned. We heard that lady embarrass a male soldier and took couple steps down and was interacting with us after help just one of them guys neatly. Following that experience, I would never forget the officer's name. I would never forget her rank. And following, I think that's what we need to do. We need some of these schools need to be military schools. That's the reality. You're sleeping on camp. We need to change up the school system in so many different directions.
I agree. But isn't that what MyLat is? Basically, a military school, and
it's something like that.
Yeah, and we need those the as it were the camps of all the youth camps of all. We need things like that. Richard, yeah, sorry if I talk about it.
Camp model, but I understand where you're coming from. Luckily, I had the opportunity or the pleasure this afternoon of interacting with an individual who has the possibility to influence some of these things. So hopefully I get a follow-up meeting to share some of these ideas in detail. Sadly, I had to dance a yard before I dance abroad. But I think this is the direction, these are the type of conversations we need to have. I have no problem staying up late having these types of conversations instead of listening to who cussing who and then a whole set of bacchanal because it does not stimulate the mind. It does not stimulate thinking. God give us a brain to use. Let's use our brains and put it to purpose.
Correct.
These suggestions we discussed tonight are valuable. The questions we ask are what we need the media to ask. These are the questions we want to hear parliamentarians answer.
100%, sir.
Why did this happen?
I don't know if the military type school would make the dent in the issue we're looking for. I think it would, talk heavy. I think it would. Here's why. I think there's a massive. The core solution is parenting. Yes, but here's the problem with that talk heavy. You cannot make people parent. If someone made a child and they are not parenting the child, you cannot make them parent the child. So I've said one of my primary solutions many times before. I think parents should be held responsible for their child's actions. I've highlighted this many times in the principle. I know children are not dogs, but it's the principle. If you have a pit bull and your pit bull bites someone, you are responsible for the actions taken by your pit bull. Similarly, if you have a bad behaved dog-like child and they go ahead and injure someone else, then you should be held responsible for that action. I believe that. That's primary. But at the end of the day, there still isn't anything you could really do to make someone parent. And in that case, instead of allowing some of those powerful willed children like the primary school child who was already a gang leader, instead of allowing them to just obviously fall through the cracks, you put them in a place where there's strict discipline, and very often, especially with young males, that works wonders. You could ask for testimonials of that. Ask many young men who were pretty dreamy in their early teens, and they bounced upon cadets. And in cadets, they got a drill sergeant that was really strict and really serious, but he took them seriously. You see that combination? That's what so many young men need. They need this strict discipline, but they also need to be taken seriously. Someone is paying attention to what you're doing here. You don't need to be a clown and try and hide your schoolwork. I want to see honestly what you are doing. Show me. I am interested in what you're doing. Show me. But at the same time, there's a strict discipline structure. And so many young men are lacking that. And I think it would be of great value to provide that to them. I do think so. Our country does not employ the brighter half to lead us in politics. Fear man. Alright, says when you see teachers start to throw a lawsuit, then they go take responsibility. It's very difficult for teachers to sue anybody in that case. Joe says if the parent can't do their jobs, the military boarding school should be the next alternative. I kind of agree. Alright, says I think the military school could be an option, but shouldn't be the widespread solution. I agree. As I said, it's the after. It's the after. And these things are supposed to already have a procedure. Okay, if your child misbehaves in school according to the level of misbehavior, and a note is sent home to the parents. If the child continues, then the parent has to come into school. If the child continues, then the child is suspended for a period of time. If the child continues, then the child might be expelled. But you don't expel a child and just leave them to stay home and become a gang member. You expel them, and now you require them to sign up with MyLat. Talk Heavy says, okay, I agree, because I had the opportunity to talk to a 13-year-old boy asking for a donation for his football team. Yeah, positive.
Because Nathan, even in the current structure of MyLat, Milat is a two years or 3 years program. Milat should become a full military university. So I should be able to, if I don't want to go to a formal secondary school and I want a military career, I should be able to say, Mommy, here was taking place. I want to go to, let's say, Milan, or the court should be able to order 13 or 14-year-old into this military organization.
I agree.
So while I have my ordinary schooling, I also have my 5 years disciplinary process, because you cannot expect instantaneous change. That is being ridiculous. If you have this 5-year program, you match the academic to the military principles with the schooling, with the sport, you could build a relationship with your seniors. And you may be surprised some of these persons may go through this program, become some of our best military officers, and go back into the exact same program. Because sometimes we can't look for the big drop in these scenarios, you know. If you could change the lives of 2 or 3 young men, that is much better than letting all of them go to waste.
I agree.
This is one of my next strong passions. I'm very passionate about the development of young men, because I know my own circumstance. I wasn't a bad boy. I grew up on the academic side of things. But there are times where the criminal road looks more feasible. It looks more profitable, I'm telling you. So when you interact with some of these guys, you begin to learn from them, but you have to build a relationship with them to begin to implement the change. If I only around you for 6 months or for a couple sessions as the quote-unquote bad boys, they would not open up to you. They had to build trust in you. They had to spend time talking, interacting. Sometimes it takes even you going beyond your work hours to interact with them. Sometimes if you have some of these instructors living on camp with them, you might find all hours in the night just instructors out talking with some of these guys in their own private space. Adding counselors to the program, adding the military health team there. So you begin to pick up some of these problems, you're having the mental support for them, and you put them into the 5-year program. Yes, there will be times.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree. And I have done quite a bit of youth work, spoken to many young men, and as I've said, I wasn't talking just out of guesswork there. Speaking to young men, you recognize that's what so many young men are desperate for. Somebody to pay them a little attention. Sometimes in making them be more disciplined, they love you for it because you are the one. By making them be more disciplined, they see, okay, this person is paying attention to me. Sometimes a young man has no relation to you. You tell him, all right, well, just make sure and come and cut grass here with me every weekend. And just by you forcing the young man to do work, he loves you for it. Because so often many of these young men are desperate for a little morsel, a tiny little smidgen of attention being paid seriously to them and what they do. RL says, but they should stop grouping everyone in the same schools, monsters going to schools with regulars. This has been a problem I've had. I've said this so often. It's ridiculous, but this problem came from the idea of a place for all. No child shall be left behind. Every child gets a place. That's a horrible idea. All children do not learn the same way. All children didn't come up in the same upbringing. All children should not be placed together in the same location for an extended period of time. That should be obvious. But some people like to pretend like we don't understand these things. And when you say things like that, they're like, are you discriminating against the urban... Are you discriminating against the urban youth? Are you saying the urban youth should be in schools separate? Kinda yes. Because the intention of a school is for every child to reach the maximum potential they have. And if by mixing them together they are not reaching that maximum potential, then separate them by all means. And as you were talking about also positive radiation, the length of time of some of these studies, I think that's a good point. You don't want to give the... I remember a young man I knew, and he joined Milat. But I think he wasn't staying, and he didn't stay for very long. It was like 1 year he was there. And the year he was there, he was going well. Left by the next year, stayed 6 months doing working odd jobs. Then within 6 months, back out onto the block in drugs. And that's part of the problem, as you are outlining their positive radiation. I think a lot of these programs have a lot of benefit, but sometimes the benefit could be very limited if it doesn't have the right length of time. 6 months might not be enough. Maybe you really need that full 5-month period. And what that offers to some of these men is an alternative to success, an alternative to reaching the top of a ladder. You see, for nearly every man wants to reach. This is getting into a weird side here, but by all means, nearly every man wants to reach the top of some hierarchy. Nearly every man is fighting for rank, for position, to move up in position, in some ranking somehow. Nearly every man. That's kind of the basis of human mating and all of that and all of that and all. That if you understand that ideal, you understand how gangs work too. Gangs have a very similar process to that. You could enter at the bottom and make your way up. So, you make your way up, you make your mark. And that's what you want. You want to provide some of these young men with an alternative to that. Because for some of these young men, they reach Form 4 and they recognize, you see this CXC ladder, I am going to come out at the end of this and be at the bottom of the ladder and everyone is going to laugh at me. So I am going to cancel this. I have no interest in this schoolwork business. I'm going to have to find my way, make my mark some other way. Maybe a life of crime might be my way to make the mark. Or you show them an alternative where they can actually be a success. When a young man graduates from MyLat, it's not just a nothing certificate he has in his mother's room. It's something that gives him a job that gives him status in society. I think that's the kind of solution we're looking for. Anyway, it's 11:15, people. It's late. We looking to wrap up. Let me hear you.
Couple of things.
Of course, Joshua.
Came up there. Couple of things. I think I remember one of my colleagues at the youth parliament stage was we had 2 YTC participants with them, and one had a stunning presentation. I remember the concern we had with him. He was saying he was having an issue to do proper research for the presentation. So we were trying to do research, and the restrictions that goes with that. He had an excellent presentation on the day. Recognize all of that. The commissioner of the YTC came to the function and real nice fanfare. 2 or 3 years later, we found out that he was stabbed to death. When we begin to do our research amongst ourselves as colleagues, only to realize we went back into the same environment, we went back into the same problem. This young guy was filled with potential. It's something I'm not going to forget. And I think also we had to teach them to do how to manage their freedom. Teaching somebody to manage their freedom in confinement is different to teaching how to manage their freedom in the free world. So
very good point.
The military academy type of setup. Because there will be times where you have to go home. But if you go home, you have rules and regulations. From the time you come back, they are going to be drug tests, and before they go, you give them the skills. When they do come back, you're not kicking them out for breaching the rules initially, but you begin to show them the different options, different avenues. You see, with a 4-year or a 5-year program out of a military, you basically graduate with a degree. But even if it's in a trade, graduate where you are an efficient tradesman, so graduate with these necessary skills that you need. Correct. This is why, for me, I'm seeing it been a 5-year, 6-year. But the administration or the government needs to now understand that you're not going to get a quick return on investment for this. This is not something you can celebrate at the next election cycle to win votes. You're going to see these results 3-4 years down the road. Some of these same young men that I had now going to meet you on the road as police officers, and they might say, "Yeah, what's going on, bro? Minister, I remember go do this again, I will give you a blind." So we need to begin to think long term. Yeah. I told a teacher of mine, you determine whether you enjoy your pension money or not. You determine whether you get your gratuity or not, based on how you interact with students in your classroom. Because a teacher that ill treat me now, the chances for me, remember. That sounds like you're threatening, you are threatening the teacher or what? No, I'm not threatening the teacher. By that time I was in university. And I saw the teacher and I told them that. I said that is the mindset teachers need to have. Even under your circumstances, the way. They said if you go into the hospital now, a number of my colleagues are now doctors and nurses. How are we to treat with them? How are we to interact? I had the opportunity to teach one of my primary school teachers during our program, and she said, I felt so proud to have you teach me and for you to do it so effectively. You just basically proved to me that I was a good teacher because you were able to transfer whatever knowledge you have to me in my retirement. So this is mindset we had to think. We had to begin to stop thinking the short term in some of these things. private sector need to get on board.
The private sector will also need to not discriminate in hiring from these schools. The thing is, RL, I don't think the private sector will. They may at the beginning, but the private sector responds to ability. If the students coming out from this university show themselves to be extremely proficient and they never get a bad report, maybe the first rounds may have a bit slow uptake, but soon enough the private sector will be begging for those people. It's about the results. If the young men that come out of the program show that they have a high level of criminality, well then the private sector wouldn't want them. But if the young men that come out of that program show that not one of them does any kind of criminal stuff, and all of them are extremely proficient, extremely well disciplined, that the private sector will be jumping up at the opportunity. And as Positive was saying, I think that's a good idea in terms of we have a whole lot of regiment officers that we feed on a regular basis, and maybe we should be allowing them to teach. Maybe that's the purpose of the regiment. Go be teachers.
No, but Nathan, it would work. I've been very honest with you, because we have such a diverse military here. It's amazing. We saw those vehicles that drive on Independence Day. We see how clean they look. We see how well maintained some of them are. If they have the right resources, I think that's one of the best programs. It's happening with the public pools now. With the Coast Guard teaching swimming in some of these areas. Don't be surprised if in a couple of years, those Coast Guard swimmers are able to beat Annie Roberts' records. Don't be surprised if the next gold medal comes from somebody being coached by a Coast Guard swimmer, out in one of these quote-unquote at-risk communities. This is where we have to think.
All right.
This is one of the reasons why I support my MP. But we had to begin to think big as a people, man, and we can't be selfish, because these programs would take money. As a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, do you prefer your tax money house a prisoner than your tax money goes into a citizen or a quote-unquote former prisoner or a convict, and you now have them on the world stage for boxing, and we now have them being able to beat Mike Tyson comfortably? So we had to think from an economic standpoint. The private sector realize the same money you're coming to thief from me, it better I invest it in you. It better invest it in programs in the area, so I make me profit, you get a little thing, and all I will live in a symbiotic relationship. Good night, guys. See you in the Tobago Live very soon.
Yeah, bro. Good night, good night, good night. Very well said, Positive Relation. Very well said. And that's about all I have for now. Very good topic for the night, and I really like also the focus on the young men, because so often it seems like they're ignored to the detriment of society. As Positive said there, that's so true. That's so true, where you told the teacher you get to decide if you get to enjoy your pension, and that's the reality, especially with the young men in society. Not saying you forget about the young women, but the young men have a certain particular place. The criminals that are out there locking in and making the society difficult to live are predominantly young men. So you would want to do something about them, even if for your own selfish benefit. All right, folks, that's all I have for now. This has been the Mindful Live. I am your host, Nathan Spring. I hope you're educated, informed, or entertained. And I will see you guys again for the next Mindful Live session, which is going to be tomorrow evening around that 9:30 p.m. mark. Till then, laters, peace. Hold it down.